Hey friends, this is Steve with Real Progressives, and I've been asked by quite a few people to try to find a way to talk about the terms that we use in this economic world, talk about the terms we use and kind of break them down for every person, right? And I know this sounds crazy, but a lot of the terms I use, I've tried to boil down from the academics to begin with. They talk in circles, they talk in riddles, they talk in ways that make you think, that kind of say what they think it should say, but it doesn't say it very clearly. And so you're left scratching your head wondering what the hell they were talking about. And I try really, really hard to break it down in a way that is accessible to the average guy, but it's not always that way. And so some of the terms that I've used in the past that have jumped out, we'll just start off with some basics real quick. How many of you guys know what the term pegged is, or non-pegged? Do you know what that terminology means? Just looking here real quickly. Terminologies, very, very important. Pegged means that the value of your currency is pegged to a commodity. In other words, like maybe we want to peg it to oil. Maybe we want to peg it to the price of cotton. Maybe we want to price it to the value of whitefish that they use for sushi. Whatever, right? You can peg it to whatever you want. In times past, what's happened is that when you peg something to a currency, anytime that, or to a commodity, anytime that commodity has any swings at all, anytime the value of that commodity goes up or down, the value of your currency follows it. Okay? So back in the day when we were pegged to the gold standard, when the price of gold would go up, the dollar would go up. And the price of gold would go down, the dollar would drop. So we haven't had those kinds of swings in a very, very long time. Why does that matter? So the federal government can react to wild swings in the market. They can do whatever they want to do, right? But you and me, we can't do that, can we? We don't have the ability to randomly get out of major debt. And if all of a sudden our dollar is devalued and our dollar isn't worth what it once was, and we're still stuck with debts that didn't change, I mean, it's very difficult for the average guy to recover from the wild swings of a pegged currency. Pegged, meaning that the value of A is tied to the value of B. In this case, whatever, right? I mean, whatever you want to peg it to. So I have a major problem. Let me just tell you right up front. I have a huge bias. Like, some people are bigots about this. Some people are bigots about that. I'm not a bigot about it, but I pretty much can't stand the gold fetishers, okay? The people that have the gold standard fetish, they drive me nuts, okay? Because they're ignorant. They don't understand what's going on. And it's very, very difficult to talk to them because they're usually the loudest and proudest in the room. And it makes it very, very difficult to talk common sense, to talk reality, to even talk about basics with them, because they are so convinced that they've got the stranglehold on knowledge, and they say things. And, there are times where I have the patience for it. A lot of times, I'm not going to lie, I don't have the patience for the gold buggers. I just don't. They're not dealing in anything of substance. They think they are because they're dealing with a metal, but they don't understand that it's all a coupon, right? So think about this. The word fiat, the term fiat, means by decree, okay? So way, 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 way back in the day, when kings would mint their own gold, and Caesar would mint his own gold or coins, etc., they would stamp the image of the king on that coin. And you would hear them say that they had to pay taxes in the king's gold. Okay? So by fiat, by decree, this coin is now the king's gold. And in order for that gold to maintain its value, it wasn't like you could just bring gold in, random gold. You had to bring the king's gold. And the king's gold had a special stamp on it. And that's how the king's gold maintained its value, was the tax. You taxed in the king's gold. Well, in our case, our fiat currency, our by decree currency, our representative of the United States kingdom, so to speak, the US dollar, is a fiat currency, meaning that the paper itself doesn't really have any inherent value. The value is implied in what it is backing, right? So what is our currency backed by? Remember that? The favorite thing. What is our currency backed by? Our currency is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States and nothing more. It's not backed by gold. It's not backed by oil. It's not backed by anything but the full faith and credit of the United States. So when we were having these debt limit fights way back when we did the sequestration austerity, we didn't pay our bills on time. We screwed up our credit rating, blah, blah, blah. That was a political choice. It was a political choice, right? It wasn't something that we couldn't do. It was something that the gold bugs, the Republicans, the Austrians, the LOL Libertarians, the gold bug fetishists, the debt hawks, the deficit hawks, the people that still actually look at the debt clock like it means something. Those people put a gun to our country's head and took away our ability to absorb the shocks of a basic recession. So, at the end of the day, what I just said, think about what I just said, is a lot of words. But what they did was they said you can't spend any more money until you pay off your debt. And we're not going to pay these debts until you do X, Y, and Z. Cut spending, do this, do that. Well, the problem with all of that is that the United States, being that it is a sovereign, meaning we are the creator, we're the God of, a sovereign fiat by decree currency, meaning our dollars, right? Our money, our currency is literally ours to print when we need it. When we need to spend money, we are never, ever, ever held to a solvency constraint. We are never insolvent. We will never go broke. Ever, ever, never, ever, never, ever, ever. Never will we go broke. We are not broke. We create the dollar. When we pay our debts, we pay it with the dollar. When someone says, but what about inflation? Ask them, point blank. You tell me what about inflation, Kemosabe. You tell me. Go ahead, break it down for me, Slick. Keep it real, yo. You tell me about inflation. I'll wait. I got plenty of time. So when I hear that, people are going back again to the gold standard logic. Now let's take that back. We already talked about pegged. So let's talk for a minute about backing our currency with gold. What if, hypothetically, we backed all of our currency with a metal? Ooh, a metal. Somehow or another, a metal makes it all better, doesn't it? But that metal, let's say, is this pie. We've talked about this before, but let's talk about it again. This pie is the gold. It's our treasury bonds being bought. All right, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But here's the gold, right? And the gold is sliced up into so many slices that equal all the dollars out in circulation. Well, if everybody decided at one time, I mean, like literally everybody made a run to the bank and said, I want my gold back. I don't want this paper dollar. All of a sudden, they do a bank run and the entire friggin' place is completely bankrupt. Now it really is bankrupt. So what do we have to do? We have to go get more gold. So we're in the dirt, we're digging, or we're going into another country and we're invading. And we're taking out more gold. We got to get gold. Gold, gold, gold. Okay? That's the only way to expand the money supply in that regard, if you want to hold to that ridiculous mindset. You realize that it is like the dumbest thing ever. It would shrink our economy instantly. It would bring about a deflationary period of epic proportions. The economy would constrict like this instantly. But the gold bug fetishers would be happy. For whatever reason, they would be happy. Oh, maybe because they can hoard some gold and become rich while everybody else suffers? I don't know. There's zero value in the idea. It's, quite frankly, maybe the dumbest idea ever. It's a terrible macroeconomic principle. But these people exist for whatever reason. For whatever reason, they exist. And sadly, they're allowed to vote. That's the most painful thing. They're allowed to vote. Oh, there's that gold bug not liking you fella thing. Anyway, so when you look at what we have in our country right now, we have a very, very, very small amount of paper dollars in circulation compared to the number of digital dollars that are actually in existence. Most dollars never ever find a piece of paper. Most dollars are never ever printed. So, for those of you in IT, you may understand this terminology. Consider it oversubscription. If you would buy a frame relay circuit, and you know that you have a T1, but you only buy a committed information rate of this small amount, right? And then you know that you can burst up and get more bandwidth out of it. Am I taking you down a wrong path here? I'm starting to realize that now I'm going into network engineering and there's no point in doing that, right? So let's just stay with economics. In any event, the idea here is this. There is a lot more digital dollars floating around in cyberspace than there are in printed dollars. When you pay your taxes, you don't go in there with one of those Breaking Bad rolled up balls of fat stacks. You don't got the Benjamins in a big old fat stack that you take to the IRS. You write them a check. They remove money from account A and they credit account B. That's the way it works. They move it double accounting, double entry accounting, debit, credit. They're zeros and ones. They're not actual paper dollars. So when the taxes go, the taxes are purged. They're deleted. They're wiped out, right? Why do they do that? Because it's a whole lot easier to say, okay, we're spending new dollars, and when we pull them out, we're deleting old dollars. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you guys or not, but this is one of the most important things when we talk about taxes don't fund spending. What we're saying is that we're monetarily sovereign, aka we are the god of the dollar. We're the god of the frickin' dollar, folks. And they've kept you scared to death to spend money with this inflationary boogaboo, with this debt you're going to pass on to your kids. And they run around still to this day saying this is the most important thing of our lifetime that we could ever fight against. These people are dead set on destroying our nation because they feel like, well, God, man, if I can't write a check to any old amount that I want, why should our government be able to do it either? Government shouldn't be able to do it if I can't do it. We're not monetarily sovereign. So the Federal Reserve, let's talk about them for a minute because my goodness, there's an awful lot of people that don't know anything about economics. I mean, like zero. But they know, and the Fed. I mean, they know jack squat diddly about economics, but damn if they don't know how to say and the Fed. And they know jack squat diddly about anything to do with the dollar, but they know how they write their checks out of their checkbook, so don't question them. And these are the things that make me go apeshit crazy trying to explain away. So here's the deal, folks. The Federal Reserve is independent within the government. It received its charter and its decree from Congress. When Congress issues anything, when Congress writes a bill, when it says spend on X, spend on Y, spend on Z, pretend like it's sending you a note, like it's writing a note in class, right? You know, like I love you with the heart, the eyes with the heart over top of it and all the smiley faces and stuff. You're right that Congress writes a smiley face love note over there to the Federal Reserve and says, hey guys, we're going to be spending this amount of money. And the Federal Reserve goes, oh, okay, cool. All right. They send it over, Treasury issues it out, and boom, the checks go out. Oh, but what about the interest on the debt? The debt is the Treasury bonds, right? It's the Treasuries. We don't fund government with them, right? We should stop selling them all together because the idea of funding government through them is ridiculous. It's not how it works. But damn if those gold bug fetishers don't want to talk that the fractional reserve system. How many of you heard that nonsense? The fractional reserve system. Not how it works, folks. Not even kind of how it works. So what ends up happening? They think that they sell these bonds to create money and that's how the money comes out. Wrong. That's not how it works at all. Congress simply writes a frickin' bill and the Federal Reserve then in turn spends it. It makes the funds available to the government. So when the government, quote unquote, pays back interest, it's not our tax dollars paying that, folks. I'll get to that in a second. The federal government simply puts out the interest and that expands our economy. Because public sector, meaning our federal government, do you all know that? Public sector, federal government. All right. Public sector deficits are private sector surpluses. In other words, we have money. The economy has money to operate. So when you say we got to reduce the deficit, tell me why. I'm not going to answer it much longer. I'm going to ask you specifically. Tell me why you want me to reduce the deficit. If you can't answer the question, I'm probably going to begin to ignore you after a little while. If you just say things to say them, stop. Don't say things just to say them anymore. It doesn't look, it's not a good look. It's kind of like the person on Match.com that uses the high school profile picture and you get to meet them and you're like, where's that person at? Oh, hi, Steve. Oh, that's what that's like to me. You know what I mean? I know you know what I'm talking about. You've been there. Tell me you haven't. So, now we're going to talk about what I call sectoral balances. This is a term that's very, very important to understanding economics. Sectoral balances. Pretend like the equalizer on your stereo. You got these switches up and down to move things up and down, bring the bass in, bring the treble, wherever you want, the MIDI. You're doing whatever you got to do to make you sound just the way you want it. It's the same with the economy. Except in this case, we've got three sectors we're really focused on. Number one, public sector. Are we in debt? Deficit, or are we in surplus? Meaning, have we taken in more than we need? Because remember, taxes are deleted, right? So if we're in a surplus, that means we've taken a lot more money out of the economy than we've spent into it. The next one is private sector, meaning you and I, our debt. Like, have I taken out so much money in mortgage and student loans and car payments and child care and child support, whatever? Have I tapped out my disposable income? Have I made it so that I can't spend money anymore? If I have, well, that's a problem, right? So the second sector is where we are at nationwide in terms of private sector debt. Have we gotten to that critical point where our private sector ability to spend has reduced to a point where the economy is going to crash? Hint, we're very close to one right now again. The third one and the last one, I used to call it rest of world. Maybe it is rest of world, but it's like all the rest, right? So that includes any leakages from the economy, like people offshoring their money, having a trade imbalance. In other words, are we a net importer or are we a net exporter? Neither one's good or bad. I would prefer to be a net importer, quite frankly, because I would much rather trade my dollars, my paper dollars, for your hard goods and services. Because what happens in any capitalist environment, we as consumers want the best price and the best quality. Well, we both know that in capitalism, companies try to cut costs. They cut corners. They do whatever they can to get the best price so that they can increase their profit margin. So if we were a net exporter, that means that all of our work and everything that we do would be tied to that model of best price, lowest cost, get by, cutting corners, do whatever you can. Whereas in this case, our balance of trade in the United States is a $500 billion a year annual trade deficit. So that means more money is leaving the country than is coming into the country. So in our sectoral balances, if we have very, very low private sector debt and we are a net exporter, well, we might do something very different on the government spending side. Maybe we wouldn't spend that much because we have a bunch of money for us to go ahead and throw around. But in our case right now, that's not the case, is it? We have very, very high private sector debt. And we have an incredibly large trade deficit. So the only way to fill us back up, to get us back to snuff, is for our federal government to spend massively into our economy. Massive government spending. Deficit spending. Another terminology, let's talk about what the term deficit means. Deficit is the difference between the amount purged from the system via taxation and the amount spent into existence by the federal government. Why do you want to reduce the deficit? Why do you want to reduce the deficit? Why do you want to shrink the economy? Help me out. Anybody. We consume too much garbage. Eduardo, incorrect. Thank you for your comment, though. We are not in any way, shape, or form able to afford basic medical services. We're not able to really afford much of anything. It costs an awful lot of money to take kids to a daycare. How many of you guys know how expensive it is to have a couple kids in daycare while you go push paper from one side of your desk to the other? That's a lot of cheese dogs, isn't it? It's a lot of cheddar. So we are tapped out to the point where most of us don't have really any disposable income at all. We're living very lean and mean. So what's going to happen? All of a sudden, people can't afford to buy products. This is capitalism, folks. Can't afford to buy products. Now the economy starts going down the toilet and people start getting laid off again because instead of laying off the building and doing remote access and stuff like that, the first thing these companies do is cut people. You and I. Which brings me to my next point. What about a federal job guarantee? Or what about a basic income guarantee? As automation does away with most of our jobs, or many of our jobs, as much of the work we do right now is really irrelevant. We just do it because it's noble to earn a living, right? Why are we not spending money to take people out of the workforce that really don't want to be there to begin with? Why are we not investing in basic income for people who are not trying to become wealthy, that are not interested in, have a different lifestyle? Maybe they want to be an activist. Maybe they want to be an activist. Maybe they want to work with impoverished people and they want to go into the inner city and they want to go help teach people. Maybe they want to do something different than what the mainstream is doing. Why shouldn't they be able to survive? Because we've got it in our head that unless a company has hired you to pay you, that you shouldn't earn a living. Well, I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of things we do that are noble exercises that could be compensated. Like taking care of an elderly parent, or taking care of a sick child, or maybe just raising your kids. Why isn't motherhood or fatherhood compensated in that regard? It's not about hard work, because that is the hardest job I've ever had in my life, folks. Raising kids is a tough deal. In any event, I want to make sure that you guys walk away with an understanding I want to make sure that you guys have an understanding of the basic terminologies so that you guys can have a competent conversation, so that we can take this stuff to the next step. Because quite frankly, I wanted to draw a Venn diagram, and I wanted to explain to you guys the problems with why we need to make sure people know taxes don't fund spending. So think about it. How many Republicans out there stand against single-payer health care, or stand against environmental fixes, or stand against a lot of things that we progressives think are really good stuff because they think their hard-earned tax dollars are paying for it? How many of them would be A-okay if they got to benefit from it too and they didn't think their tax dollars were paying for it? I'll bet you a lot more than you will ever know. And since taxes don't fund spending, why are we fighting with them? Why are we not hugely growing our coalition? Because there's some horrible people that are stuck in the vote blue mindset. Truly abominable people that want to keep the partisan bickering alive and well. I mean, abominable people that like that whole us versus them crap. Instead of reaching out and saying, guys, man, we can do this together. You know that? And we don't have to be purity testing. I want everybody to want to fix the environment. I want everybody to want single-payer health care. Universal health care. Not universal insurance. I want universal frickin' health care. How do you do that? The only way to do that is to break down the myth so these people understand. Find out what it is that the Republicans really hate. If they just hate government, well, those are not the people we're going to reach. But if they're worried about fraud, or they're worried about this, that, and the other, we are too, right? There are areas of agreement if you choose to be in the solution. The things I'm telling you are absolutely life-changing if you choose to use them. If you choose to stay stuck and you choose to continue the whole gold bug nonsense, well, you know, I can't do much with you. You're one of those people I got to wash my hands of. I'll keep saying it anyway. I mean, you're welcome to come into the fold at any time. But at some point in time, it's up to you to decide that you want to live in the right way and you want to own truth as it is, instead of saying this nonsense that literally ended in 1971. The gold standard ended in 1971. The Bretton Woods Accord was removed. Richard Nixon took us out of it. There's no more of that. To say anything other than that, it just defies value. It's like one of those valueless comments. And it needs to be swatted with absolute crushing precision. Because it's the kind of stuff that literally is destroying the nation. I mean, destroying it. You got bipartisan moronicness that is willing to cut spending. And we need to spend like hell right now. We need to spend very much. If you have any questions whatsoever, if I said a term that you didn't understand, or there's anything that we covered in here that you didn't understand, please put it in this thread. I will review them afterwards. I'm going to put the links I always put up, and I will do my dead level best to answer every one of your questions. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you I can't answer it, but I'll do my dead level best to answer every one of your questions. This is Steve with Real Progressives, hoping you learned a little bit about economics tonight. Have a great night, everybody. I'll be on later to talk about some personal thoughts I have about where we go next as a nation. Have a great night.